EIGRP authentication in NixOS. In this video, I'm going to show you how we can configure EIGRP authentication in NixOS. The configuration of EIGRP authentication in NixOS has a little difference with the iOS, but the concept is similar with the iOS. You know that in iOS, we should configure first a keychain, and after that, we can use that keychain for the authentication. And you know that EIGRP only support the MD5 type of authentication. In NixOS, we have the same condition. In NixOS, if you need to use authentication in the EIGRP, first you should configure a keychain, okay? And in keychain, you can configure multiple keys, and also if you need, you can configure, for example, accept lifetime and send lifetime. You learn about these topics in the iOS course, EIGRP in iOS course. Here I'm going to show you only the configuration of this keychain and also the configuration of EIGRP authentication on NixOS, and I'm not going to delve into the concept of the, for example, keychain. After configuring the keychain, you can use this keychain for two types of authentication. The first type, that is similar with the iOS, is the interface-based authentication. This means we enable this keychain on, for example, one interface, and we should enable interface by interface this method. And also in NixOS, we have another method that we don't have this method in the iOS. You can use the authentication, for example, with a router-based method or EIGRP-based method. This means that, for example, we configure the keychain on the router EIGRP mode, and this means that, for example, we can configure for multiple interface with only one command. Let me to show you how we can use these two methods. The first method is the interface based method. Okay, let me to show you. First, we should configure the keychain. Okay, how we can configure the keychain? It's so easy. Let me to show you. For example, for configuring a keychain, we can use this command switch config, then keychain chain name. The name of keychain is not important for authentication. And after that, switch config keychain, we should configure a key or multiple key ID. Then we will have the switch config keychain key, for example. After that, we should configure a key string, and then a string. This is a password. After enabling the configuring the keychain, in the next step, we should enable authentication, EIGRP authentication on the interface. This is the, for example, second step. First, we should go on the interface, switch config interface, okay, interface name, and after that, we will be in the switch config if mode. First, we should use IP authentication, EIGRP, okay, tag name. The tag IP authentication mode for the EIGRP tag MD5. This means that I'm using the, for example, this type of authentication over this interface. Only the one important thing is that EIGRP only support MD5 now. And after that, in NixOS. After that, we should enable the keychain on this interface, switch config if, with the command IP authentication, okay, keychain, and then EIGRP tag, and then a chain name or keychain name. Let me to show you how we can configure with this method. Starting from with the NixOS one, the first thing is configuring the ETH21 interface, ETH21. Then first no switch port, then configuring IP address 10.121/24. After that, enabling this interface. Then, for example, host name is switch 1. Let's go to the configuration of the EIGRP, but before we can configure the switch 2 about the IP addressing. Host name switch 2, interface ETH21, okay. No switch port, IP address is 10.122/24. no shutdown. Then we can configure the EIGRP. The first command is enabling the feature EIGRP. This is the first command. After that, router EIGRP, for example, Arash, this is a tag, router EIGRP Arash. And after that, autonomous system should be configured. Autonomous system is 1. And after that, address family IPv4 unicast. This is the next command. Okay, then we should enable EIGRP on the interface ETH21. Interface ETH21, IP router EIGRP Arash. That's it. Okay, show IP EIGRP interface, show us, or IP EIGRP interface brief, show us that we enabled EIGRP on the ETH21. This is the configuration of EIGRP without authentication. Look at here, show IP EIGRP interface can show us that we didn't configure authentication on this interface. Authentication mode is not set. And also in the NX OS 2 switch 2, the first command for enabling the EIGRP is feature EIGRP. Okay, then router EIGRP, for example, Arash. After that, we should configure you can configure router ID, but it's not mandatory. After that, the first command is autonomous system. Autonomous system number is 1 again, address family IPv4 unicast. And after that, on the ETH21, interface ETH21, I'm going to enable IP router EIGRP, for example, Arash. That's it. As you know, when we check the neighborship, show IP EIGRP neighbors, now we have one neighbor, the router 1. This is the EIGRP configuration without authentication. Now it's time of configuring the authentication. First, we should configure a keychain. Show keychain. We don't have any keychain. Let me to configure keychain. Keychain name is not important. Keychain A, for example, key 1, key string, for example, Cisco. This is our keychain. Show keychain. Okay, key 1. This is the text of keychain converted to the, for example, one password. Okay, one encrypted password. And also let's go to the NX OS 2, configuring the key again, the keychain A, key 1, key string, Cisco. Okay, now we can enable this keychain on the interface ETH21. Interface ETH21. The first command is IP authentication mode for EIGRP Arash. That is the only one mode available, MD5. This is the first command. The second command, IP authentication keychain for EIGRP Arash, is the name of keychain is, for example, A. That's it. This is the configuration of the keychain on the, this is the configuration of authentication on the ETH21. Now show IP EIGRP interface, show us that on this interface we are using authentication mode of the MD5, and the keychain that we are using on this interface is keychain A. And after that, show IP, for example, EIGRP neighbors can show us we don't have neighborship. Why? Because now the authentication failed. Let's go to the NX OS 2. Here we can configure again the same method on the interface ETH21. The first command is IP authentication mode for EIGRP for EIGRP Arash MD5, and then IP authentication keychain for EIGRP Arash. For example, the name of keychain is A. Show IP EIGRP interface can show us that we enabled authentication on this interface. MD5 is the method and keychain is A, and after that we have neighborship. Show IP EIGRP neighbors. Okay. And then, for example, on NX OS 2, show IP EIGRP neighbors, we have neighbors. This is the first method of authentication, and this is the interface-based authentication. And also, we have this method in the iOS. This is the repeat of the authentication method in the iOS. But in NX OS, we have another method, that is the authentication in the EIGRP mode. Let me to show you how we can configure authentication on the EIGRP mode. Let me to configure here. The second method is EIGRP based or router based, for example. Okay, globally we can configure authentication for many neighbors. First, we should configure again the same keychain. Keychain configuration is same, but we should enable EIGRP authentication in the previous part on interface in this for example method on EIGRP on router